Number 1. Deal with your own weakness and don't judge others. Deal with your own weaknesses and don't judge others. Mentally strong people understand the overwhelming power of thoughts. They recognize, for example, how filling one's head with criticisms of others wastes mental space better spent strengthening and improving oneself. Yet, there's also science to support this great habit of non-judgment. In particular, researchers have found judging and criticizing others establishes and increases, with the extent of judgment, what's known as the bias blind spot. That's psychological predisposition we all have leading us not to see our own mental hang-ups. By the same token, we believe we can magically see the hang-ups of others. We discount their disagreeing with us as stemming from their own biases. Number 2. Don't trust your own thinking. Don't trust your own thinking. One positive consequence of not judging and reducing the bias blind spot is what's called intellectual humility. That's a powerful trait one builds up over time by refusing to trust one's own thinking. In other words, the intellectually humble person is aware she might be wrong. She knows that not only might there be other valid points of view, she accepts hers might be invalid. Moreover, the intellectually humble person is willing to be proven wrong without falling apart emotionally. By combining humility and this sort of mental resilience, she then opens the doorway to learning, avoiding biases, and taking advantage of new knowledge. Yet, to be clear, her refusal to trust her own judgment doesn't mean she lacks confidence or conviction. It means she refrains from coming to conclusions on the basis of speculative assumptions and emotions. Number 3. Don't pity yourself. Don't pity yourself. Mentally strong people recognize that self-pity is a siren that can lure you to a watery, psychological death. For every excuse you create, you clone a mental roommate who constantly nags at you whenever you face the slightest difficulty. You're hungry. Your roommate tells you, you must eat or you'll die. You are tired. The excuse comes to your mind and you can't work any harder. By contrast, mentally strong people rid themselves of this enemy early on. In a study of disabled and seriously ill people, for example, researchers found that few, if any, such resilient warriors engaged in self-pity. Indeed, when compared to people in the study not suffering such afflictions, the disabled and physically ill exhibited markedly less self-pity and greater happiness and well-being. Thus, the implication is obvious. By stopping the self-pity beginning with the smallest inconveniences and challenges, and extending to the largest, we gradually rid ourselves of unpleasant and goal-destroying roommates. Number 4. Show empathy towards others. Show empathy towards others. At the same time, although mental strength requires showing little pity for ourselves, showing pity for others is incredibly powerful. Indeed, Darwinists and classical economists both have been dealt a major setback by recent science. Contrary to the oft-argued assumption that selfishness is genetic and an inherent part of our nature, i.e., the Darwinist dictum of survival of the fittest and the Kantian notion that individuals are self-interested, researchers from Berkeley have shown mankind's development is more on the order of survival of the kindest. In other words, empathy and sympathy are more necessary for human survival than acrimonious pursuit of survival, self-interest, and the pursuit of personal gain. They've also found that this tendency towards pitying others is genetic and heritable. Practically speaking, the scientists found parents who cultivate and demonstrate empathy and sympathy in their families end up with happier and more resilient children. Moreover, this doesn't just apply to children. Adults can gain greater resilience and mental strength simply by showing greater resilience and mental strength, simply by showing greater compassion towards others and by, you guessed it, making this a habit. Number 5. Understand fear and how to control it. Understand fear and how to control it. One of the most important characteristics of a mentally strong person is her ability to deal with uncertain surprises, particularly bad ones. Fear, as I've written elsewhere, can be addressed through a variety of coping mechanisms. For example, we naturally tend to greet the unknown with a fear of loss. This tendency biases our thinking and impairs our actions and abilities to intelligently take risks. Yet, mentally strong and resilient people actively resist this tendency. For example, they self-distance by stepping away from a situation. They recollect themselves. Wisdom, therefore, tells them that responding quickly but haphazardly to a crisis is typically more dangerous than a delayed but more thoughtful response. That makes such people more successful professionally and better suited for positions of leadership. Hence, the term fearless leader might be a redundant phrase, at least insofar as mentally strong leaders go.